All right. Welcome back to Talk About LA. My name is Steve Napolitano, and I have Brad Jacobson there behind the camera. And if you're one of the 5 people who have watched our show on a regular basis, you know we're usually out in the community. But tonight we are in the studio at the world-famous Comedy and Magic Club here in beautiful downtown Hermosa Beach. And this is the first of what we hope to be many episodes of roundtable discussion on current events. Tonight, here with me is Bob Holmes, former Manhattan Beach City Council member and mayor, and political activist, particularly in the Republican Party. He's on my left, strangely enough. And then there is Kevin Cody, publisher, owner of the Easy Reader, an independent local paper here in the South Bay. And to my right, who's usually on everyone's far left, is Michael Keegan, former Hermosa Beach mayor and city council member. And next to him, next to me, is Gerry O'Connor, community activist in Manhattan Beach and the South Bay in general. So let's dive right into it, though. We want to talk about current events, current topics, and nothing is more current and more controversial and more of a roller coaster than the election here in Hermosa Beach. The November 5th election, where on election night you had Nanette Barragan coming in first, followed by Jeff Duclos, incumbent Jeff Duclos, city council member here in Hermosa Beach, and then followed that by Carolyn Petty. Now, fast forward a couple days, maybe a week even, and there was a switch. There were 700 provisional ballots that were turned in. And once those started being counted, things switched around, and Jeff Duclos fell to 4th place. And Hanny Fangari found himself in 2nd place. And then a few days after that, after another count, counting down the provisional ballots, Carolyn Petty moved from 4th and then 3rd into 2nd place, and Hanny fell to 3rd, leading Jeff Duclos by 7 votes. So what's going on in Hermosa Beach?
Well, I think it was an interesting election night. I mean, the candidate who spent the most money got 5th place.
Which was
incumbent Kit Bobko, and I think if we follow the money, the next person to spend the most money was Nanette Barragan, and then behind her was Carolyn Petty, and then Hanny Fangari. I think that in these small local elections, probably the most important thing that happened in this election was I think that the 700 provisional ballots were really late registrants. And I think they had a big effect on the election, and I think that was due to the bar initiative.
And why did the incumbents lose?
Well, I think that it probably shows that Kit Bobko probably was deeper and would have lost by more without the initiative, because I think that he had supported. He was in mailers for the campaign for the bars that were trying to propone, that were against the initiative, and so he was in their mailers, so he actually got publicity through that, and so that won 70 over 70-30, and he still didn't win. So I think that helped him. Had he not had that, he might have lost by more. But I think that the outcome probably for Carolyn Petty had helped her a little bit. I think those voters and her alliance kind of with the bar owners and the support of that, and an early support of going against the initiative probably helped her, and John Bowler also tagged on. That was basically a slate.
Let me turn to Bob here. Bob, what's your impression? Why did Kit get 5th?
Voters don't like real dissension, and it's no secret that Kit and Duclos didn't get along. There's no secret there at all. On top of which, there are no term limits in Hermosa Beach, which I think is a good thing. But Kit was running for a 3rd term. I think it's exceptional that perhaps we'll see in the next few days with the registrar of voters completing the recount that Jeff Duclos was not elected to a 2nd term. Most incumbents get a 2nd term.
You raised a point, and you moved on from it. There's a dozen different things going on here, and I want to turn to Kevin here about the oil issue. How big a role did oil play?
The council didn't take a position on the oil, and Nanette Barragan exploited that to the hilt. Her direct mail pieces showed oil wells and her opposition to oil. Neither Duclos nor Kit came out against oil. The other thing I think you're missing is that Duclos and Kit and Savelli, the former chief, who was very popular, all did poorly. They ran traditional walking campaigns. Barragan and Bars hired top-notch consultants
How much, as a voter, do you think it was a turnoff for the current council to say neutral on an issue that is probably the most important one that the city has faced in a number of years?
Well, Steve, I think that's you probably hit the nail on the head. It's really difficult to get an incumbent out of office. And I think that was probably a very key issue that caused two incumbents to lose this time. And to me, that throws a red flag, because we've had incumbents that I've thought about trying to put effort in to get out, and I didn't bother, because quite frankly, it's near impossible. So you had to have a big force to get them out, and I think that was, if not it was certainly a major contributor.
But you brought up something earlier, though, Michael, and that is the role of business, because and slates, and for the late provisional ballots that were walked in and everything, you know, you thought or your analysis is that they favored the business perspective. And was Jeff seen as not in the business camp, or?
I would say he was not. He was, the business camp was pushing Bobco, Bowler, and Petty. And I would say that if, you know, the best campaign was probably run as a well-rounded campaign that includes walking, was probably by Berrigan, because she walked. She ran a professional mail campaign, and she took a stance on the issues.
It's just a little frightening that someone who's so unknown to the voters, who comes so new onto the scene, finishes so strongly. Not that she may turn out to be an absolutely sensational council person, but what were the voters thinking? They didn't know this person.
Someone who takes position on issues.
Well,
the oil thing was a big deal.
It comes back.
But,
well, it comes back.
But
to
a position
oil, right?
on issues is not a track record. I mean, she took this was not a hard thing to figure out. Say I'm against oil, and I'm going to get a large percentage of the voters in favor of me. But that doesn't say anything about her abilities or her commitment, and yet she still comes in first.
Let me ask the group this: is this election, because there's going to be another election down the road on oil, right? Is this a referendum, a precursor to what that result is going to be, or do you think it's too early to tell?
I'll be happy to take anybody's bet that oil will be defeated in Hermosa Beach next year.
Are you saying it's going to be what's going to win? I'm not sure what you're saying.
No, oil.
There will be no oil drilling. The ban will be
no
kept in
oil
place.
But I think getting back, you know, there's a tremendous amount of name recognition that goes with council races, and people like the five of us up here, and hopefully our viewers are very involved in these issues. But the practical matter is, most voters, sad to say at the local level, are more concerned if little Johnny's soccer game is at 10 or 10:30 Saturday. They don't get into to the issues that much. So you get into some issues of personality, and you get into some issues of name recognition.
Kevin, referendum on oil or not this election?
No, the oil thing, that's like an uphill battle beyond any that I've ever seen. The fact that they actually voted for oil to lift the ban at one time in the history of the city says it's not 1,000-to-1 chance, but it's a pretty uphill battle.
If it is defeated in the sense that there will be no oil drilling, then the city needs to make a payment. And so how are they going to make that payment?
Well, the payment will be pretty easy to be made, because first of all, we're giving the oil driller $10 million worth of real estate.
I mean, what's the mechanism? What will you be?
The mechanism was we have about $8 million in the bank currently. So the contract calls for the driller, E&B, to allow financing under commercial terms and rates. So we could always borrow the whole $17.5 million from them and pay it off over 30 years. So really, if we borrowed the whole thing, it would amount to probably in the range of, what, $350,000 to $400,000 a year in debt service. Let's just say we paid it off with the $8 million, so we have now $9 million. We have 17 million minus 8. We have $9 million to pay. There's a storage facility lot next to the city hall, of which, because if we do approve oil, we lose that. So that real estate is gone. So we could sell that now, because we've obviously proved we don't need it. So we could sell that for about $8 million. So we have the settlement in those two properties.
Maybe it's wishful thinking, but I agree with Bob. I think there's Ice Cube's chance in hell of it succeeding. That's not to say that there isn't going to be a boatload of money spent trying to make it succeed. And that's, to me, troublesome. That's the troublesome part.
Okay, let's move on then. We're going to move on to the Manhattan Beach City Manager, David Carmody. November 4th, he was up for review from the city. His contract was up for review for possible renewal or extension, and it was not. The council decided not to. In fact, the council decided, after it decided not to extend the contract, to actually dismiss Mr. Carmody without cause. And just, I think yesterday it was, we find that David Carmody has been hired by the city of La Puente. So why the abrupt exit of David Carmody?
Dave Carmody came in at a very transitional time, obviously. We had just released our last city manager, and there were a lot of upper management changes, and he helped through that transition. And Dave did a good job in some of those transitional things. Dave also was hired because there was very much a focus on unsustainable pensions and what we could do about that. And Dave had just implemented some new labor agreements in the city of Seal Beach, and we looked to him to carry that ball here. And frankly, I, as a resident, have to tell you that I'm not happy with the way that ball was carried at all.
Amen.
And the other thing that he came in with was, I remember him saying specifically that, ask anybody, I'm all about openness and all about transparency. And quite frankly, there were some catastrophic failures there. And you know, I love our city clerk, but our city clerk's performance, just in a simple primary task of the city clerk's office of publishing the meeting minutes of the city council, fell apart like never before. We had 6 months in arrears of simply posting city council meeting minutes. The public couldn't even follow along if they tried, and most don't bother to try.
Let me come back, though.
It's kind of a problem.
Bob, you seconded the motion there on pensions. Can you speak about that?
The public employee retirement system is a train wreck ready to happen. Dave did not really do anything for pension reform in the city, as Gerry noted.
By the time those initial contracts with the police and firemen and the Teamsters were approved, the state had already passed the mandates to have two-tiered pensions, and we did nothing to add to that. All we did was meet the state requirement.
That's
period.
correct.
Kevin, thoughts on?
There is one financial benefit to the manager's departure. You know, I didn't really approve of the city partnering with him on a house, but the appreciation on the house paid for his severance pay. So the city didn't get damaged by buying the house. I think you've got a more activist city council now, and they were not happy with a strong city manager who didn't seem to communicate very well with them.
I think David brought a lot of calmness to the city at a time it needed it. I think he did a good job. I think pension reform, as I tried to do pension reform when I was on city council, is no easy task. And we're talking about pension reform in the peace officer area because that's the biggest problem by far. It's not the general employees that are killing us.
What do you think the next city manager of Manhattan Beach, what do you think their personality or their approach to being a city manager in the city should be, or you know, what is that fit that Manhattan Beach needs?
There's a couple of things, and you know, you think short-term and long-term. Short-term, one of the things we need is a good facilitator for our city council meetings, frankly, because they've been managing them incredibly poorly. Running meetings till 1 a.m. in the morning and bumping agenda items so that when people do show up to speak to items, they find out that they have to come back at a future meeting. So that's one thing. But the other thing is we do have now, I think we do have a majority of council thinking towards open government issues, and we need somebody who is in fact transparent and puts the information out there, and when we have town hall type meetings, actually publishes an agenda in advance so people can come read it prepared and not only show up and give spur of the moment thoughts, but actually give some thought beforehand and participate in a meaningful way.
You know, Gerry's observation about transparency is one I've heard council members express in Manhattan Beach, and they weren't happy with Carmody's management in that area. But Gerry's also talking about a city manager who's strong enough to keep the council on track, and those are two conflicting qualities. And good luck finding that person.
I would like to touch upon something that was discussed and actually rejected now at this point by the Manhattan Beach Planning Commission, and that is the idea of restricting offices and banks to the second floor or above, but prohibiting them from the ground floor of retail spaces on certain streets in downtown Manhattan Beach. That if there's a problem area they want to rezone it, is that the solution?
Well, I mean, I read a little bit on this, but I'll keep in mind that the realtors don't want to pay a business license fee either, and they want to be on the ground floor. And Manhattan Beach is trying to sustain improvements in their city. They're looking at trying to do a facilities plan, and they're looking for ways to raise money. And if you keep putting businesses that don't generate any income on your best retail spaces, you're going to slow down the growth of your city. So if all the spaces are occupied by professionals who aren't doing any sales tax work and aren't doing any business license fees, it's going to hurt the residents in general. So I think the city council needs to keep studying it. I don't think it's something you just keep putting away. I think in certain sections of your town, you want to make sure those are attractive to people from the outside, and then you get tourists and you get locals who want to shop there. And if the real estate business is so lucrative to where they make so much money, they want to be in those spaces that cost quite a bit of money, why aren't they paying a business license fee just like a bikini shop is?
But what has happened is the Planning Commission heard the issue, but quite frankly, there was quite a disconnect at that first public hearing. And the Commission didn't reject it. The Commission continued the matter, and it's going to come back to them, actually.
I think they're going to study something else, though, than necessarily that restriction.
Because there was a disconnect. And quite frankly, the Downtown Business and Professional Association and the Chamber of Commerce hadn't talked it out between themselves before it appeared before the Commission, because they seemed to be at different odds slightly on what they wanted to do. And then what staff recommended was perhaps not the best initial offering. We don't want all of a sudden a series of real estate agents set up in a row on Manhattan Beach Boulevard in downtown, because frankly there were a couple of suggestions that there are studies out there that say that retail shoppers, when they walk down a block, if they hit 2 or 3 empty spots, boom, they're gone. And,
a dead zone.
Yeah, a dead zone. And you don't want to create that. But suggesting that realtors can only be on the second floor and then suggesting that that's not a ban, that was pretty laughable.
What do you think about regulating the business mix of downtown?
I think that the actual office is becoming a bit of an anachronism. I have a number of friends who never go into the office, never go into a real estate office. But beyond that, Steve, to answer your question, yes, I can remember times that the claim was we had too many, believe it or not, video rental places in town. There were 2 right next to each other in the 200 block of Manhattan Beach Boulevard. I think that to attempt to try and say there are too many boutiques, too many dress shops, too many cleaners, too many this, that, too many restaurants. I'm kind of a free market guy, so I'm not in favor of outlawing the real estate offices down there.
And I don't want to focus or beat down too much on real estate offices, because there's other offices too, right, that don't generate the sales tax that retail shops do. Kevin, looking at the beach cities, is the mix right because the market bears it, or are people being priced out?
Well, they're clearly being priced out. I mean, the small retailers disappearing. You look at 200 Pier Avenue. It's set up as a retail, at least the ground floor is set up to be retail, and probably a third of the ground floor is real estate offices. To say that's bad is, social engineering at a level that we're all wary of approaching. But you've got Malaga Cove and Palos Verdes, which once was a thriving little shopping center, and now that's 100% real estate, or probably 80% real estate offices. So this social engineering that the conservatives say is so awful, they embrace it, all the time, as long as it's against a business like a tattoo parlor or a bar that they don't approve of.
And our council has talked about economic development, and in fact, they're very much attempting to focus on economic development. But I have to tell you, I was a little disappointed when they put all of their economic development eggs into the Chamber of Commerce basket. The Chamber of Commerce needs to play a role, but I don't think it should be their exclusive focus for economic development, and that's what they did, and I think that was a mistake.
I served on the council back in the 80s and 90s. That was the 1980s, not the 1880s, Steve.
I was going to ask, but thank you.
I'm going to beat you to it.
For clarifying.
But for 11 of my 12 years on council, I was the council rep to the Downtown Business and Professional Association. And I don't really hear problems much different today in 2013 than I heard in 1980. The rents are too high. They were too high then. Well, but people would pay them, and people with unrealistic business plans would come in and think just because it's Bob's boutique, it's going to succeed where Kevin's boutique didn't. And a year later, there's a closed or going out of business sign on my window. The downtown statistically provides very little sales tax revenue to the city.
I would say that just the general layout of Manhattan Beach's downtown, you just want to keep the Plan Commission meeting and discussing the issues and keeping the landlords aware of what you're trying to achieve. Because if you don't, as a landlord, how do they know really what direction the city wants to go in if the city doesn't at least give some direction on what they'd like to see?
Okay, before we wrap up, though, final thoughts from our panel. Michael, go.
I just wanted to say, Steve, that I think this is a great idea to have a show on and highlight the cities of Manhattan and Hermosa Beach, and I enjoyed being on it. And I will say to Mr. Holmes, I look forward to discussing the next election to see if who wins. I'm usually right, but we'll see.
All right, you just earned your invitation back. Gerry.
Yeah, it's a great venue, and I think it's a good opportunity. You know, I'm always all about getting more and more people engaged and involved in the community. And Steve, you've wanted to do this for so long. I'm thrilled to see it happening, and thanks for inviting me and let me be a part of it.
Absolutely. Kevin.
Hermosa has 3 new council members, no common background. I hope they get to know each other quickly. Every one of us knows that council members that respected one another got a lot more done than the ones who grandstanded and tried to fight their colleagues.
You've seen enough of them. Bob.
You know, if we do this long enough, I'm liable to get Keegan squared away.
Okay, that wraps it up then. I don't want to keep you here all night. We're going to wrap this up, though. I just want to say thank you. We hope to our viewers that this is intriguing, thought-provoking, and that you get a sense of the news behind the news. I want to thank our panel here. Again, Michael Keegan, Gerry O'Connor, Kevin Cody, Bob Holmes for joining us here tonight. And we hope they join us in the future. We hope you had fun tonight. By the way, for those who are viewing this, we're interested in your comments and questions. talkaboutla@gmail.com. Feel free to email us there with any topics to cover and or suggestions. We'll delete the ones that tell us that we really suck tonight. But other than that, we just want to thank you for watching. And also, there are sponsorship possibilities available here, opportunities available. If you want to sponsor the show, feel free to contact us there. Again, talkaboutla@gmail.com. Again, thank you all. Thank you, Brad. And thank you very much to the Hermosa Beach Comedy and Magic Club for hosting us here tonight. This is a fantastic venue. And again, we thank you for joining us. So, have a good night.